He left his town as a dreamer and returned as a great star, a story that sounds like a fairy tale, yet it was written with real struggles, sleepless nights, and countless sacrifices. Every small town has that one person who dares to dream bigger than the streets they grew up in, and for him, those dreams were not just a passing thought, they were a burning fire. Imagine walking away from everything you know, every familiar face, just to chase something no one else believes in. That's where his journey began, and little did anyone know how far it would take him. When he first left, the whispers followed him. Some said he wouldn't last a week. Others laughed, claiming he would come back with nothing but regrets. The weight of doubt can crush even the strongest hearts, but he carried those words like fuel in his chest. He wanted to prove to himself, and maybe even to them, that his dreams were worth more than the fear of failure. The road ahead wasn't paved with comfort, it was filled with storms, rejection, and endless nights of wondering if he had made the right choice. And yet, within that uncertainty, he found something powerful: resilience. While the world tried to remind him of his limits, he was busy testing how far he could go. The city he moved to was overwhelming, full of people chasing the same dream, but he never let that intimidate him. Instead, he turned every closed door into a reason to knock harder. He kept going, even when silence was the only answer he received. Sometimes, the most dangerous battle isn't against the world, it's against the voice in your head telling you to quit. Years passed, and he began to change, not because life became easier, but because he became stronger. His failures shaped him, his struggles refined him, and his persistence gave him a voice louder than doubt. Slowly, the boy who once left his hometown with nothing but a suitcase and hope started to build a name that people could no longer ignore. He wasn't chasing applause anymore, he was chasing growth, chasing truth, chasing the version of himself he always believed he could become. And one day, after all the battles fought and all the scars earned, he returned. But this time, he wasn't the dreamer people once doubted, he was the star they couldn't stop admiring. The same streets that once carried whispers of disbelief now echoed with pride and wonder. His story wasn't just about fame, but about courage, persistence, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest dreamer can rise to greatness. When he first set foot in the city, it wasn't the glamorous world he had pictured in his childhood dreams. The lights were bright, yes, but they blinded more than they guided. Every corner seemed to test him, every face reminded him of how small he truly was among millions. He carried only a suitcase, a notebook, and a heart unwilling to surrender. There was no safety net waiting if he failed, only the weight of starting over. Yet even in that chaos, something deep inside whispered, "This is where you belong." The beginning was not glory, it was hunger. Long nights working odd jobs just to pay rent, days spent running from one audition to another, knocking on doors that never opened. He walked through crowded streets with pockets nearly empty but a soul still burning with possibility. The city has a way of stripping people down, exposing the difference between those who dream and those who endure. He chose to endure. Every no carved into him like stone, but it also sharpened him, making his resolve unbreakable. There were moments when the weight felt unbearable. Moments when the silence after another rejection seemed louder than any applause he could imagine. The loneliness was crushing, friends were miles away, and doubt was always near. But even in those nights, when the city felt colder than the winter wind, he looked up at the skyline and reminded himself why he had left. He had not come this far to surrender to fear. He believed there was a reason, even if the world couldn't see it yet. And slowly, the cracks began to show light. A stranger's compliment after a small performance. A phone call for an audition that didn't end in silence. Tiny signs, fragile but undeniable, that perhaps the dream wasn't foolish after all. He began to see that greatness doesn't arrive in thunder, it arrives in whispers, in opportunities disguised as struggles. With each small step, he felt himself growing, transforming into someone stronger than the boy who had left his town behind. The world still did not know his name, but destiny was already in motion. Every hardship had been a lesson, every failure a prophecy shaping him into who he was meant to be. There was a storm inside him that refused to be silenced, a voice that declared his story was only beginning. He could feel it, the moment was near, the shift was coming. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The turning point came on a night when he almost gave up. He had walked for hours under the city lights, the weight of another rejection pressing down on his shoulders. His wallet was thin, his energy drained, and his faith shaken. But then, by what seemed like chance, or perhaps fate, he stumbled upon a small stage tucked into the corner of a cafe. The microphone sat lonely, waiting for a voice, and the crowd was small but attentive. Something within him whispered, "This is your moment." With trembling hands, he stepped forward, and when his voice broke through the silence, the air shifted. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was raw, honest, and alive. For the first time, strangers stopped, listened, and felt something. And in that instant, the boy who had been overlooked countless times was no longer invisible. That night planted a seed. The cafe owner approached him afterward, asking if he would return to perform again. It wasn't fame, it wasn't fortune, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, no matter how small, carry the power to change destinies. He returned week after week, pouring his soul into every word, every note. People began to come back just to hear him again. Some recorded his songs, sharing them online. Slowly, whispers began to spread beyond the walls of that cafe. He had always imagined the world discovering him in grand arenas, under blinding lights, but here he was, being discovered in the intimacy of a small room, one heart at a time. Greatness doesn't always arrive in explosions, it sometimes arrives like dawn, quietly, until suddenly the world is lit. But with growth came new trials. The path to recognition is never straight, it twists, it breaks, and it demands sacrifice. His schedule became relentless, balancing exhausting work shifts during the day and pouring everything into performances at night. Sleep became a luxury, and loneliness, his only companion. Yet, he did not complain. Deep inside, he believed that every tear, every empty night, every sacrifice was shaping him for something greater. He carried a fire no rejection could extinguish, a determination no hardship could bury. And though many still doubted, he had begun to learn the most important truth of all: dreams are not given, they are earned through blood, persistence, and unwavering faith. Then came the moment that changed everything. A well-known producer happened to walk into the cafe one night. At first, he barely paid attention, but as the performance went on, something about the rawness of his voice, the sincerity of his words, caught him off guard. After the set, the producer approached him with an offer, an audition that could open doors he had only ever imagined. Fear surged inside him. What if this was just another rejection? But courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to stand tall in spite of it. He accepted. And in that moment, the dream that once seemed unreachable began to take shape right before his eyes. The audition was nothing like he expected. The room was filled with faces that showed no emotion, only judgment. The silence was suffocating, and for a brief second, doubt tried to steal his voice. But then he remembered the long nights, the empty pockets, the laughter of those who said he would never make it. He remembered why he left his town, why he endured so much pain. And with that fire burning in his chest, he sang like he had never sung before. Every word was drenched in truth, every note in sacrifice, every pause in unspoken prayers. When he finished, the room was still silent, but it wasn't the silence of indifference. It was the silence of awe. For the first time, he knew they had truly seen him. Soon after, doors began to open. Not all at once, but enough to change the direction of his life forever. A recording opportunity here, a small show there, each step building momentum. His songs began to travel further than he ever could, reaching ears he had never met, touching lives he would never know. Messages poured in from strangers saying his words gave them hope, gave them strength, reminded them to believe again. And that was when he realized his dream was bigger than him. He wasn't just singing for himself anymore, he was singing for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough, for every soul carrying a broken dream. His voice became more than sound, it became a lifeline. But success is never without its shadows. With recognition came pressure. Suddenly, expectations weighed heavier than rejection ever had. The world that once ignored him now demanded from him. He faced temptations, betrayals, and moments where the glitter of fame tried to corrupt the purity of his purpose. Yet, he held on to the memory of where he came from, the nights when all he had was a dream and faith. He reminded himself that he was not here to be adored, he was here to be true. The boy who had left his town was still inside him, whispering, "Never forget why you began." And so, even as the lights grew brighter, he kept his soul anchored. The headlines began to write his name, the stages grew larger, the crowds louder. But even in the roar of applause, he carried with him the silence of those first rejections, the sound of his own voice echoing through an empty room. He understood now that greatness is not about standing above others, it is about standing tall in your truth, no matter who is watching. And so, while the world saw a rising star, he still saw himself as that dreamer walking alone through the city streets, guided only by faith. That humility became his armor, protecting him from being consumed by the very success he had once prayed for. One day, the call he had always dreamed of arrived, a major concert, a chance to perform on a stage where legends had stood. It felt surreal, the kind of moment you imagine as a child but never fully believe will come true. As he stepped onto that stage, thousands of voices roared his name, but his heart went quiet. In that silence, he remembered everything, the dusty roads of his hometown, the laughter of doubters, the nights of hunger, the cafe where it all began. And then, as the lights bathed him in gold, he sang, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the dream that had carried him this far. The audience erupted, but he knew the greatest victory was not their applause, it was his journey. And so, when the time finally came to return to the place where it all began, he wasn't the same boy who had left. He walked those familiar streets again, but this time, the whispers were different. The same people who once doubted now looked at him with pride, awe, even tears. The town that once seemed too small to contain his dreams now celebrated him as one of their own. But deep inside, he knew the truth, he had never left them behind. Every step, every song, every sacrifice had been for more than just himself, it had been for them too. For everyone who needed to be reminded that greatness can be born in the smallest places, from the humblest hearts. There comes a moment in every life when doubt feels louder than faith, when the world seems determined to convince you that your dream is too far, too fragile, too impossible. But his journey proves otherwise. It proves that even when the night is darkest, there is still a light within you that refuses to be extinguished. No matter how many doors close, no matter how many voices say you can't, there will always remain the whisper of destiny reminding you, keep going. That whisper is the seed of greatness, and only those who refuse to give up will see it bloom. Your dream was not placed inside your heart by accident. It is not a coincidence, not a mistake, it is a calling. And when life pushes against you, when storms rise to break you, remember that those storms are not signs of failure, but signs that you are being shaped, refined, and prepared. Faith is not about seeing the whole path, it is about taking one step, and then another, even when the road is hidden. His story shows us that belief, even when small, can carry you further than the strongest doubt. Look at how he returned, not just as a star, but as proof that faith and perseverance can transform the impossible into the inevitable. That same power lives in you. No matter where you are right now, whether you feel unseen, unheard, or forgotten, your story is still being written. You may not know how, or when, but if you refuse to quit, the day will come when the world will look at you and say, you made it. Until then, walk by faith, not by sight, and trust that every step matters. Never underestimate the value of your struggle. Every tear you shed, every night you feel alone, is not wasted. It is building you into someone unshakable, someone destined for more. And when your moment arrives, you will see that every pain was not punishment, it was preparation. So, hold your head high, even in the midst of hardship. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are being molded for the very destiny you were born to fulfill. So let this story remind you, greatness is not reserved for the chosen few. It is for the dreamers, the fighters, the believers who refuse to give up. If he could rise from the shadows of doubt to stand in the light of his destiny, then so can you. Believe, even when no one else does. Keep walking, even when the road feels endless. And never forget, the same faith that carried him forward is waiting to carry you too. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I truly hope this message touched your heart and reminded you of the power that lives within you. If this story inspired you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next message. And please, share this video with someone who needs encouragement today. You never know how a word of hope can change someone's life. Until next time, stay strong, keep believing, and never stop chasing the dream that was placed inside your soul.